I've just got back from the Northwest Audio Show, that's in Cranage, which is in England, and normally I don't cover shows on this channel, but on this occasion I took some photographs on my phone, and do you know what? They didn't turn out too bad, so I thought I'd share them with you. Now, shows are normally an opportunity for manufacturers to show their latest and greatest offerings, but the Cranage show tends to be a little bit different. The Bristol show is the biggest in the UK. Most of the mainstream brands tend to be there, at least as far as the UK marketplace is concerned. Then there's the high-end show at Munich, the most prestigious hi-fi event in Europe, quite possibly the world. It's called the high-end show for a reason. Manufacturers tend to flaunt their flagship models. The sheer size of that show and the number of people attending makes it quite a spectacle. I can appreciate an expensive hi-fi system as well as anybody else, especially in the right setting, but £100,000 plus systems don't have a great deal of relevance to me in my hi-fi journey and most other people. The Northwest Audio Show has a more relaxed atmosphere. It's a favourite of mine and many of the manufacturers that I spoke to at the event as well. Probably because they don't get their pockets rinsed as thoroughly as exhibiting at Bristol or Munich, and that's why there tends to be a lot of smaller or boutique manufacturers there, which lends a certain appeal. Now, I don't think for a second that it's possible to appraise a hi-fi product at a show. There's too many unknown variables and generally high levels of background noise and poor room acoustics, but it's certainly nice to get your eyes and ears on hi-fi products. Just before I move on and give you a rundown of the show highlights, I just want to say thank you to all the people at the show who reached out to me to say hi and offer me words of encouragement. Quad were demoing their soon-to-be-released Platina series of amplifiers and Revela series of speakers. The amplifier is a 200 watt per channel beast and will retail somewhere approaching £5,000. Coming from the same stable that owns Audiolab, Mission and Wharfdale, this is a move to establish Quad as a more premium brand. With such an iconic heritage that few people can match, this is exactly the space in which I think Quad should be operating. On this occasion, design wasn't done in-house, but outsourced to Karl-Heinz Fink and his team. He's a very well-known and respected designer in the industry. Expect the new Quad products to hit the stores this autumn. JBL has almost 100 years of history in producing loudspeakers, but here you see their new SA350 amplifier and matching CD player. I'm a fan of the brushed aluminium fascia with wood side panels. JBL is part of the Harman Audio Luxury Group that contains brands such as Arcam and Mark Levinson. Initially I didn't get it. I couldn't get my head around why you'd produce JBL electronics when you've got brands such as those in your portfolio. So I asked the Harman representative exactly that. Now, to be clear, I asked this at the Bristol Hi-Fi show, not Cranage, but the response I got from him was quite illuminating. JBL electronics had been produced by the same team of engineers but voiced differently to get the best out of JBL speakers. It's more of a fun presentation to the personality and less of your typical audiophile experience. Cranage is not free of hi-fi exotica. Oh no, no, no. In one of the largest rooms was 60 grand's worth of Magico S5 speakers, fed by a Dan Agostino progression preamp and monoblocks. That'll set you back in excess of £90,000. The front end, which I didn't photograph, was from DCS. I think it was the Rossini range. That's about 70k for the transport, DAC and master clock. The funny thing is that that isn't the top of the range stuff from any of those brands. What I heard sounded okay, but there were a lot of people in that room and the background noise levels were very high, so it isn't the kind of environment that you'd want to listen to a system like that. And here's the thing, if you hear something at a hi-fi show that sounds underwhelming, you can't reliably blame the gear. As I mentioned earlier, there are just too many variables. But you know, if something sounds good, then the manufacturer's done a great job of setting up that system. So let me whiz through a few of the other rooms. AudioNote Valve Electronics seem to have a good synergy with Devore Fidelity speakers, a very natural tonality. Accuphase Class A amplification was being demoed with Karl-Heinz Fink's own brand of speakers. The stand mounts, named Kim, retail for £10,700 in the UK and seem to have plenty of resolution. Little-known French manufacturer Revival Audio was showing off their Atalante 5 speakers, a large three-way monitor with drivers designed in-house, and I bet that isn't a typical MDF cabinet. Look good value at just under £4,000. Talking about good value, the EverSolo Streamer and DAC seems to be getting a lot of attention at £759. Powered by a Cayin valve amplifier and driving Larsen speakers, it sounded impressive in that small room. I'm not sure what's going on with the BBC licensing of the famous LS35A at the moment. There seems to be versions out there, official versions of the classic near-field monitor, that don't fully adhere to the original 1960s spec, but there's no relaxing of standards as far as Falcon Acoustics is concerned. Jerry Bloomfield is a stickler for detail, and you can ensure that his speaker is as close to the original BBC LS35A as possible, down to the Mylar tweeter, Beckstreen woofer, Baltic birch plywood cabinets, Tigan grill cloth, and crossover components including the transformer style inductors that have to be hand built these days. They sounded massive compared to their size, with good detail and oodles of body and warmth in the mid-range. The Primaire i25 amplifier seemed to do a fine job in driving them, but I really wanted to listen to the speakers sat on the floor, which I didn't get to do. They're the new Falcon M10s. Jerry's brought them out because the cost of making authentic LS35As has risen exponentially of late, and he wanted to see what was possible if he used modern materials and wasn't hampered by those constraints. I've heard very good things on the industry grapevine about the Falcon M10s that retail for £2,395. That's just slightly less than their LS35A offerings. I'm hoping to get the M10s in for review at some point. Magnepan aren't the only company to make planar magnetic speakers. It's nice to see another little known French manufacturer, Diptyque Audio. They do larger models and one smaller than these. In the USA they have Devore. Here in the UK we have Supernatural Audio. Danny Batty builds these 2.5 watt single-ended triode amplifiers to order. With such limited power, high sensitivity speakers are essential. He also makes some line array speakers to go with these amplifiers, which I wasn't able to photograph because I couldn't get the angle right, and they were too big for the small room he was exhibiting in, to be honest, but it's certainly interesting stuff. Talking about space, you hardly ever see open baffle speakers in the UK because they need to be large to generate any meaningful bass. These Hex 3 speakers are small enough to be accommodated in many European homes. They retail for less than £5,000 and are made by another boutique British manufacturer. The great thing about Cranage is that you see so many designs that aren't run-of-the-mill. Here's Jez Kerr with his K300 Mark III transmission line stand mounts. It's the baby in the range that retails for £6,395. It sounded really good, powered by an Italian EMA Labs Studio 362 amplifier. Check out those VU meters, another brand that you don't often come across in the UK. Golden Ear was flexing muscle with their new T66 tower speakers with built-in DSP controlled active subs. The bass from those things is impressive. It's the first speaker to be shown from a range that should be available before the end of 2023. Respected designer Bruno Putzis is responsible for Key, Purify, Mola Mola. Grimm Audio is another brand that bears fruits from his labours. The MU1 streamer is £12,000 plus an additional £774 for the optional 8TB hard drive. It was feeding their active DSP LS1 BE speakers that start off at £20,995. The DSP was doing its job with clean, crisp bass lines delivered even at high volumes in a small room. One of the most coveted brands in hi-fi, PMC, launched a more affordable range of speakers at Munich. They brought the £1,250 Prodigy 1 stand mounts to Cranage, powered by Heed Electronics. In the next room was their £1,995 floor-standing Prodigy 5 sibling. Amplification on this occasion was provided by a Parasound P6 preamplifier and matching A23 Plus power amp. Both PMC models should hit the shops this autumn. I had a good chat with the PMC representative. I was curious to learn how they'd produce transmission line speakers for less than half the price of the 25i range, but with so much trickle-down technology. I was informed that there were fundamentally two areas of saving. One was to ditch the wood veneered cabinets for a painted finish, and the other was to use tried and tested drivers to reduce R&D costs. So the tweeter comes from the Professional Result 6 and the midwoofer from one of their custom install series. Dealers are well represented at the show as well. In one of the larger rooms, Hyphonics showcased Moon Audio Electronics powering £20,000 Sonus Faber Serafino speakers. It sounded clean and dynamic, but a little clinical in tone. Auden Distribution was in a similar size room. The importer for Hegel and Amphion was demonstrating their flagship gear. The P30A preamplifier is £7,000, the H30A power amp £17,000, and the Krypton 3 speakers £15,000. That system sounded well balanced. Exposure were giving their soon-to-be released 3510 CD player a spin, accompanied by the matching preamp and monoblocks. The speakers were the latest offering from yet another small UK manufacturer. The Ophidian Incantos retail for £6,000. Regular viewers of this channel will know that I like those two brands a lot, and I'd be keen to get more of their products home for audition, even though those particular speakers are likely to overload my room with bass. But I'm hoping that Gareth will produce a smaller version at some point in the future, which I could audition at home. In any case, I wasn't able to get much of an impression at the show, and that was down to poor room acoustics and a lot of background noise. Now that tends to be the case in quite a lot of rooms at hi-fi shows, and that's why I haven't gone into any great detail to describe the sound in this video. It just simply isn't possible. All I can do is give you a general overview of my impressions. That said though, there were still 3 rooms where I thought the sound was pretty good. At the beginning of the first day, before the masses descended, I was able to listen to the NVA P50SA preamplifier and M600 monoblocks, feeding quirky looking speakers from yet another Little Brit brand, 3 Square Audio. I reviewed the little brother to these amplifiers, and those AL speakers have been on my radar for a while. Both brands have a very similar design philosophy, and that's to use the bare minimum of parts but of very good quality to preserve subtle details and timing information within the recordings. The speakers use first order crossover parts, and the tweeter sits behind the midwoofer on the front baffle to mechanically time align the 2 drivers. The AL speakers retail for just less than £2,000 if memory serves, and there was plenty of evidence of their ability to retrieve fine detail and disappear from the soundstage in that demo. At the end of the first day, when things had quietened down, I got a good listen to the new Neat Elite floor standers powered competently by Atoll's SDA 300 streaming amplifier. The £3,995 dual mono all-in-one powerhouse did a fine job. But the speakers were the star of that show. I really like the neat Petite classics that retail for just under £2,000, but for £3,250 you can get the Elite floor stander, which has a different midwoofer by the way. It's also a little bit more if you want the real wood veneer finish, and they're just about to hit stores. My first impression was very favourable. They seem to demonstrate my holy trinity of sound quality, which is clarity, dynamics and a fairly natural tonality. Last but certainly not least, Harley Lovegrove, that many of you will know from his Pearl Acoustics YouTube channel, was demonstrating his Sibelius speakers. They're one of the first samples to be made from Baltic birch ply, finished in a choice of colours as opposed to solid oak. Power was developed by Thomason Stereo's Galleon TS120 amplifier that he's developed alongside Dodge Audio, but there was also Harley's Pass Labs Int 25, Sugden A21 SE, and the 50th anniversary model on the rack. Harley and his team were gracious enough to allow me and a couple of my patrons that had accompanied me to a private demo on the second day before the show started. And what struck me about that particular demonstration was how resolving the speakers were and the sheer amount of bass they produced from a single driver design. Now I know that was a small room, but Harley dropped those speakers off to me the next day on his way to Belgium. And I'm not giving anything away here. You're going to have to wait for the review. Listening tests are underway. I hope you've enjoyed this rundown of the show, and I just want to say thank you once again to all those people who stopped to say hi to me at Cranage, as well as the patrons who accompanied me over those 2 days. It was a lot of fun hanging out with you. My question of the day is simple. What's piqued your interest lately? Please let me know about that in the comment section. All that remains for me to say is if you like what I'm doing with this channel and you haven't done so already, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification. You may want to check me out on Patreon for consultancy services that you can access there if you think I can help you on your audiophile journey. Also, check out the ABA Club on Patreon, which is a fun way to interact with me and other patrons. But for today, for now, a British audiophile, signing off. it.